Hello and welcome to Mercedes-Benz in Stuttgart. My name's Danny Hornigold and I'm your host today for this talk about motorsport and sustainability, or more precisely, how is Mercedes driving sustainable change in motorsport? My guest today, six-time Formula One World Drivers' Champion Lewis Hamilton, Mercedes-Benz EQ Formula E driver Nick de Vries, Mercedes-Benz Head of R&D Markus Schäfer, and Mercedes Head of Motorsport Toto Wolff. Guys, a very warm welcome here today. Thanks so much for joining us. What better place to be having this discussion than just over the street from Mercedes Development Center here in Stuttgart. Let's get started. Nick, let's start with yourself. Fresh back from Marrakesh and a race this weekend, halfway through your debut season and Mercedes' debut season in Formula E. How's it going for you?
Well, Marrakesh itself was actually very good in many ways. Unfortunately, not rewarded. We had a strong qualifying performance, a very good race, but we picked up a software penalty early in the race, which caused a drive-through. But I think overall, we've had a very positive debut. We've shown great potential and performance, not always executing what we should, but in general, I think our package is very promising. We just need to try and get all the details right in order to really be up there in front.
Yeah, thank you very much. Lewis, Toto, the dress rehearsals, if you like, are over. All the hard work of the winter, the first two tests done. It's now showtime. Lights go out next week in Australia. How are you guys and the team? You ready for action?
I think I am. Are you?
Yeah, I am too. we had a pretty good test. I think there is some positives that we can take. The car feels good. Lewis can say more about that. Overall, still some little tweaks and reliability gremlins that we need to sort out. But overall, I would say we can say that was a good 6 days.
Car feels good, Lewis?
Yeah, honestly, it's really fascinating. Every year you come back and you see all the hard work that everyone's done and see a new car that rolls out and the evolution each year and the development, the technology, how far it's come to this point. I remember my first years of testing in 2006 as opposed to now, and the running is generally a lot smoother. We do a lot more mileage, generally because we have less days to put in that mileage. And just the way that the team works, it's on a completely another level than what I obviously started with. But the car is basically an evolution of last year's car. And it's a small step in the right direction. So I hope that it's enough for us to be right at the front fighting for wins.
You mentioned innovation there, and we'll come back to that later. But Markus, I'm going to jump over to yourself, and it's the first tough question of the day, if you like. And I'll speak from a fan's perspective, because one of the things we hear a lot at the moment is about how, where does motorsport fit in an automotive industry undergoing this fundamental transformation? Is motorsport relevant anymore? And I guess my question is, I want to know the answer to that. I'm sure actually good for you guys to know the answer as well. But from a fan's perspective, is that statement true?
Well, I truly believe that motorsport has a future. Definitely it has a great past when you talk about Mercedes. So when you go back in time, the first race, I believe, was done with Daimler engines. And way back then in 1901, the Mercedes cars, participated in race. So that's our history. It's in our genes, and we want to take it definitely into the future.
As we look at the history, we've seen those interactions between motorsport and racing. But as we look now at a real connection and that real interaction between motorsport and series production, what's the real connection there?
Well, of course, lately we had great success. I mean, the championships, I love this team. I like the guys here. And they bring great spirit to our team, but we have to take it in the future. And the license to operate in the car business and in the race business, I believe, is sustainability. And definitely we have a plan in our series business. We're changing the company to a sustainable business strategy. So this is changing a lot for us, how we develop cars, how we run the company. And it's affecting the entire supply chain, the way we run our factories, and it's affecting our fleet of cars in the future. And our commitment is a very, very bold commitment in the future that we want to be CO2 neutral in 19 years from now with our entire fleet. And we want to make sure that everybody is on board. So the same way we move, motorsport has to move. We are a true believer that sustainability is so important for us to be credible. And that's also in our genes to take this into the future.
Toto, I want to hit you with one of the buzzwords of the moment, which of course is electrification. And it's a word we've heard more and more in recent years. But I think some people might be surprised to know it's something in Formula One you've been gaining experience in for quite a long time now.
Yeah, electrification is happening in Formula One since more than 10 years. We've started with the first KERS system, which was brake energy recovery, and that has developed over the years. And today one can say that the Formula One engines are the most efficient hybrid engines in the world. We came from about 27% of thermal efficiency to more than 50% thermal efficiency, which is a great number. And at the end of the day, it is about lap time in Formula One, but it is today, the formula is the efficiency formula. And this is why Mercedes has been at the forefront over these years, because we take our motor development, battery development, energy recovery systems very serious.
Lewis, talking about that history and those moments, it's incredible to think you were the person to take the first hybrid win in a Formula One car. Amazingly, that's 11 years ago now. You've also won 5 of the 6 modern hybrid era world championships. It's the most powerful race engine we've ever seen in Formula One. I can't imagine what it must feel like. How does it compare being behind the wheel and harnessing all of that energy that Toto's spoken about?
Well, what's been incredible is the experience of driving I drove a V10, I think probably in 2005. I then drove the V8 to then switch, and I raced with the V8 for a period, and then to move and to grow with the team in terms of developing that V8 engine into a more drivable, more efficient engine into the V6 range, and then just seeing that step over and the innovation there, the drive. This is the perfect test bench for pushing technology and developments. You know, it really is the best lab that you could possibly have. And as Toto was saying, I remember actually I went to Boston in 2009 to where we get the batteries that we have within our car. And I go in to visit that technology being developed in its early stages, in its infancy, and recruiting that team that started working for Mercedes. So, you know, I've been there right from the get-go, and I like to think that we've played a serious role in what you see in today's cars, and the technology that's now in Formula E, the technology that's now in our road cars. I think we were really at the forefront of pushing that technology, and we still are. As we continue to develop and push that technology forwards, it will improve for the road cars.
It's amazing, because growing up I remember hearing about turbo lag, and then you ride on board with you now and look at the Speedo with this hybrid engine, and there doesn't seem to be a lot of lag there in terms of the power you're putting down.
No, there's not. I mean, back in the day there was the initial lag, but the energy recovery system is able to fill in the gap of that lag, which is usually a dip in the power curve. And so it's just a smooth gradient, basically.
Relentless power.
Yeah.
Marcus, I'll jump over to yourself. We talk about motorsport, and Lewis, again, we're talking about innovation there. We've spoken in the past about motorsport being the fastest research lab in the world, but I guess the question now is, do those innovations and that research, does it really cross over now and to series production?
Well, I think it describes it very well, the fastest lap. So this company is all about innovation. Mercedes is all about innovation and, you know, taking it to the next limit. And our team, my team, the R&D guys around the world, and the teams in Brackley and Brixworth, they're very close. And by design, they're working hand in hand. And the transfer of technology from the motorsport to series, and sometimes back, that's key for us. Key experience in the past. So some examples in powertrain, you mentioned the hybrids, the turbochargers. I remember you were testing some turbochargers way back then, which we're using in series later on. Thermal efficiency, taking thermal efficiency from levels of the past to more than 50%. That's something we take into series production. So that's a great lab, and it's about the continuous improvement spirit, which I really, really like that you guys have over in motorsports, that we can take to the company here, and we learn a lot.
We've talked there about hybrid technology, but we're also seeing this big leap now into fully electric drives. Where does that fit in?
Well, you know, when we talk about climate change and digitalization, which are probably the big mega trends which we see, so we have to deliver. We have to deliver as a company with our products. So we talk about electrification of powertrains. So we talk about plug-in hybrids. But the next stage is clearly EV cars. So we are on a steep incline of bringing new models. So, dozens of plug-in hybrids, 10 full electric vehicles. So we mirror the same in motorsports. And that's why we have two teams here. So we have, of course, the F1 team and we have the Formula E team. And we have consciously made the decision to be engaged in both and to transfer from both. And I was in England and just meeting the guys doing the e-motor lately. And it's really impressive how we exchange also there in the field of e-motors and efficient e-motors back to series. So very conscious decision, and we are the, I believe, only OEM being engaged in F1 and Formula E.
Well, talking then of Formula E, a new series for Mercedes, Toto. Just tell us a little bit about the series and how it's been so far.
It's very exciting because it's a series that it's in its very early stages, 6 years. If you compare to Formula One, 70 years. And what's been done so far is amazing because the platform works. It is in the cities. It's a completely different. The spectators are from a different group, very urban, and the electric racing is fascinating. The tracks are shorter. The race format is all within one day. It's a lot about improvisation. The drivers need to get used to the car quickly, prioritize. And the competition is fierce and tough, and the regulations are very different to Formula One. So there's the adaptability must be on a very high level in order to be successful. So we enjoy the platform.
Nick, I probably should have asked you about Formula E, being as you're the driver, but I can't imagine that you're Formula 2 champion. You've had your whole junior career in traditional motorsport. Just how much of a change has it been stepping behind the wheel of a Formula E car?
Yeah, you're right. It's very different, obviously, and it's an electrical engine. It has very little downforce. We run road tires instead of slicks. We almost only race in city centers, so the tracks are all very unique. We have to deal with energy and battery management instead of more likely tires. So it's very different, but the basics of racing remain the same. Although it requires a slight different mindset and approach, especially during the race. Like in Formula One, they have telemetry, so live data. In Formula E, we don't have that. So there is a lot of communication between the driver and the team ongoing throughout the race in order to...
You're the telemetry, telling the team down the radio, effectively.
Yeah, what's happening, and obviously you have code wording and stuff in order for the team to track where we are regarding consumption and strategy. So from that point of view, the communication within the team and between the driver is very, very important. And as Toto rightfully said, it's all organized on one day, so there is no room for error. Like if you make a mistake in FP1, then you're on the back foot from the beginning. So it's very challenging. And generally, the cars are very similar. Manufacturers only get freedom to develop the powertrain and the gearbox, but the cars are relatively similar. So you see that the competition is really close. And races are shorter. We have quite a lot of fan engagement. So I think we show that electrical cars can be very exciting.
Toto, we just heard Nick talk about how different FE is from other racing series, and let's reference F1. From a powertrain development point of view, clearly very different power units. Do they need to be developed separately, or is there a synergy between the work that's being done with the hybrid for F1 and then, of course, the fully electric drive in FE?
Both power units are being made in the same place in Brackley in the UK. But I would say that there is not only synergies between the Formula E motors and the Formula One power units, but also the road car production. And this is, for us, a laboratorium to learn for the road car production. And insofar, it's a new platform that we participate. So battery management, energy recovery are different than in Formula One. And that's why we need to approach it with modesty and learn. But there was a great deal of information and IP that we had previously from Formula One, which we utilized for the Formula E motor.
Marcus, the racing commitment over the years in F1 and FE, clearly that powertrain knowledge, it's obvious the synergy with what's happening with road cars. But I think as a fan, one of the things we've loved over the years in motor racing is seeing other innovations come to series production. Are there any other real world links now that take place from the motorsports activities across into the cars that we get to drive as the public?
Well, we are just next to one of the biggest wind tunnels, testing wind tunnels here, and this leads me to aerodynamics, for example, or talk about suspension and safety. So there are various areas where we cooperate, and I think we have a deep knowledge about aerodynamics. You have some very, very deep knowledge, and that's essential that you perform on aerodynamics, but also on suspension. So we exchange here, we have teams here that work hand in hand with the teams in Brixworth on aerodynamics, on suspension. But also very important is simulation. How do you simulate your test results with real world? So this is a cooperation over many, many years where we got closer and better and better. So we're learning from test benches and correlate to what's really happening on the street. And this was very essential in motorsports way back then already. So over time, we brought this kind of simulation methods to serious cars to learn from testing and just predict what's going to happen on road. And safety. I mean, safety is a key aspect of our brand. And safety is a key element in Formula One, the key element. And that's a great also platform where we work hand in hand together.
So when we look at sustainability, it covers a lot of different areas. One we can talk about is financial sustainability. And Formula One historically has been going through regulation changes. But as we look forward to 2021, not just design regulation changes, but now a budget cap, huge change and challenges lie ahead. What does that look like from a team perspective?
Well, technically the format changes and we will have completely different cars next year, which is a great challenge that we actually enjoy. But similar to US sports, Formula One has now introduced the notion of a budget cap, which limits all technical spending at a certain level, which is well below our current spending and well below what all the other big teams spend. So that's a challenge for us because it means restructuring the team, the way we work, the process changes. And eventually the target was to compress the field more in terms of lap times. I think that could be an effect. But for us, it's a great opportunity as well, because as much as it's a challenge to restructure a company that has been very successful as a racing team, it also changes our business model into profitability. We have solid revenue streams from TV money and hosting fees. Our sponsorship pipeline looks very strong, and for the first time ever, the chassis operation of the team is going to be profitable. And that is something that for Marcus and his colleagues in the board is very important, that we are not only becoming sustainable in terms of our energy efficiency and our carbon footprint, but also in terms of our financial sustainability.
Marcus, you talked earlier about carbon footprint and the ambitious targets that lie ahead there. And Toto, I've heard over the winter some pretty ambitious numbers and figures coming out of Brackley and Brixworth. Can you tell us a little bit about your plans in that area?
Yeah, we are obviously much smaller than all of Marcus's operation. We are 1,000 people in Brackley and 1,000 people in Brixworth, and we have taken the challenge on in trying to be net carbon zero in 2020. We are by this summer, we will be receiving all our energy from renewable sources, which is something that we are very proud of. We will be all the little gains that you can find around not using plastics and trying to optimize our carbon footprint generally by using different generators and fueling them in a different way. We will be net carbon zero as a team by the end of 2020, and that is something that we are very proud of and shows that it's going in that direction.
I think it's great to see these new sort of corporate targets, if you like, but I think it's always the individuals within an organisation and within us as mankind that make changes. And Lewis, I'll reflect to you on that, because obviously people that know you and follow you on social media will know how important this topic is to you when we discuss sustainability. And I'd just like to know, on a personal level, making those changes and trying to have that impact, just how it affects you, do your job as a racing driver, and just your thoughts on it in general.
I mean, it's great to hear that as a brand, altogether, we are moving in the right direction. I think, naturally there can be criticism from the outside, but from my part, I feel like I feel my strength is that I'm able to help change it from within. So, being very close to within the organization, trying to push for these changes, which I've been very vocal about for quite some time. And, I think about like the future of my nieces and nephew and what kind of world they're going to grow up in. And I'm trying to really use my platform and my voice, really just trying to raise awareness and shift the mindset of these industries in a positive direction.
And you've made some big changes, I guess, over the years, just personally, in just the things you're doing towards that.
Yeah, I mean, I'm trying to make sure that I'm carbon neutral in as much as I can. It's very, very difficult because obviously we do travel to a lot of these different races, but minimizing your travel, for example, not using, finding materials, for example, my clothes collection, for example, is now nearly up to 80% sustainable. So pushing in the fashion industry is something I've been pushing also. I'm on a plant-based diet, so I don't use any animal products at all. When it comes to events, I always make sure my team makes sure it's glass rather than plastics. So avoiding using single-use plastic and waste, and also really trying to push Formula One in that direction, which I think, ultimately it's a slow process, and it's a shame that we are reacting now because it should have been done before. But the important thing is that we are reacting, and I think it is going in the right direction.
Yeah, I think we'll see big change this year across Formula One. It'll be exciting to see what happens there. Nick, I'm going to jump over to yourself and back to Formula E, because we've talked about what it's like from the driver's seat, but the reality is, as we look to the modern world, it's a really different series. You're racing in all city centres, in all electric drive. It's meant to be extremely accessible and family friendly. And I just want to step you out of the car and just ask you what your experience has been like travelling to these races for the first time, what's taking place, because a lot of our viewers will no doubt have watched F1 or other motor racing series, but they might not have been to an F3 race yet.
Well, I would encourage them to do, because I think our races are really exciting. We obviously just go to city centres, so it attracts a different audience. Everything is organized on a single day, so there's not much waiting around, and it's really an action-packed day for spectators. There's a very nice e-village for fans to spend time, where Mercedes has an EQ house, and they tell and teach, I would say, the fans about our electrical vehicles. We have a lot of fan engagement, such as a fan boost, and people refer to Mario Kart for our attack modes, which I think is making the racing exciting. So yeah, in general, Mexico, we had about, I think, 100 spectators just in the stadium.
100,000 spectators.
Yeah, which was phenomenal. So I think it's great. Unfortunately, we don't get to see much of it because our days are very tight. But I think it's an exciting event and good to watch.
Well worth a visit out to the Formula E. Lewis, I think I'll wrap up with yourself really, because you mentioned earlier during this chat about you first test drove an F1 car back in 2006. And I guess now it's time to look forward and just how you see Formula One as we look to the future.
That's an interesting question. Well, I don't have a marble? Let's see.
Crystal ball.
Crystal ball. But as I said, I'm very, very fortunate. I get to work very, very closely with Toto and the team and Mercedes. It's great to see the communication is constantly improving within our organization. And I like to think, Toto's talking about this year being carbon neutral and being the leaders in our industry. I think that's really, really key and important, because I think in us making a change and taking action, I think the others will react and do the same thing. So we're starting that. I like to think we're kind of being the catalyst in that movement. And then in terms of racing, I think you already see next year is going to be quite a bit of a different car. I don't know, I've obviously been to the factory. I know what kind of engines they always work on.
We can't say.
Even smaller engines that they work on. And, we've gone from a V8, which we use a third less fuel than before. The developments that are coming forward in the future are going to be really, really interesting. So if Formula One will be FE1 at some stage, I'm sure, probably not in my racing career, but beyond for sure, I think it's got a really bright future.
Brilliant. Well, I think to wrap up, let's say, Toto, Lewis, good luck next week in Australia, and for the defence of your crown, Lewis, and for the Constructors' Championship. Nick, have a great rest of the season over in FE. And Marcus, we look forward to hearing about the new cars of the future and the next innovations. Ladies and gentlemen, thank you so much for tuning in with us here today. I think that's all that's left to say really is, as we look to the future, Mercedes-Benz, I think it's clear, will continue to pioneer new technologies, and motorsport, as it has done for so long, will innovate some of the sustainable change that we drive towards in the future. Thanks again for watching.